At the Sprott Natural Resource Symposium in Vancouver, the Investing News Network had the chance to speak with Byron King, editor of Whiskey Gunpowder at Agora Financial. Here's what he had to say about the rare earth market.
Yeah, I want to go back to a topic that we discussed at PDAC, rare earths.
Rare earths.
There's been so much that happened since then, I hardly know where to start. What can you tell us about developments?
Well, why don't we start with about, I guess it was 2 weeks ago or so, middle of July. This guy down in Washington, President Trump, signed an executive order ordering the Defense Department, in all the bureaucratic language, ordering them to get smart about rare earths and to develop a domestic rare earth supply chain. This is the absolute, baseball bat to the noggin that the bureaucrats down in Washington need. They need the order, they need the instruction from the top that you will not lose your job if you go out on a limb and start to work to develop a domestic rare earth chain that the U.S. has access to. When I say domestic, U.S., Canada, Australia, allied nations, NATO, things like that. So anyhow, just the other day I saw this request for information that came out of the Air Force, Wright-Patterson Laboratory in Dayton, Ohio, where they're looking for information. It's called an RFI, a request for information, on rare earths. And when I read through the RFI, I thought to myself, is our government, corporately, institutionally, are they that unknowledgeable about rare earths that they have to ask some of these very basic questions? Very, very basic chemical questions, industrial questions, supply chain questions that I can't imagine that they would ask those questions about, the steel that goes into submarines or something like that. But anyhow, the good news is that the instruction is out there to develop a rare earth supply chain, and it's going to happen. I think the kernel of a Western, meaning non-Chinese supply chain is already out there with a company like Lynas of Australia. But we are going to see in the next 6 months to year to 18 months, we're going to see several, I'll call them North American ideas, really come to the forefront in terms of, these are small companies, but small companies with really great ideas, really great intellectual property, and we're going to see some very novel thinking in terms of where we're going to get our rare earths. We're going to get our rare earths from mineral sands. We're going to get our rare earths from coal ash. There are certain mine tailings that will work. And rare earths will not so much be a mining issue as they will be a chemicals and processing issue, but the science, the engineering is out there to make it work. It's really kind of kick-starting or priming the pump, to get a U.S. business chain or U.S. Canadian Western business chain working, because it's going to be an international effort with the U.S. and its allies. There are a couple of ways it could all happen inside the United States. I don't see it happening all within the United States. There's just too much bureaucracy. The business climate still isn't right for a lot of things.
Okay, so you do see this government action as promising. It seems like we've had maybe some false starts with rare earths, but this is really going to result in something meaningful.
Well, we have definitely seen false starts with rare earths. I'm a veteran of 2010, the Battle of 2010, I think that there are so few companies out there right now that. But there are a couple of them that really have great ideas. And I would be very wary of, if you're Joe investor or Susie investor out there, beware of, the fly-by-night XYZ company that shows up and says, hi, I'm a rare earth play. Well, where have you been for the last 10 years? If they say, well, it wasn't the right time and now's the right time. Now, I would rather have people coming in who've been in the business for years, who have a track record. They raised money during the tough times. They kept their science going. They kept their engineering going. They kept their ideas flowing. They kept their contacts going. Beware of any of these, quick, just add water kind of projects. Don't go near them until they've been pretty scrubbed by by people who've been following the industry. Stick with some of the names that have been around for a while.
And you mentioned before that separation technology, that kind of thing, is going to be the place to look. That sounds very hard for investors to understand, to get to the bottom of. How can people look at that?
Well, I write a newsletter, and I'll address it at various points. I mean, there are people who probably will try to write, a rare earth newsletter. Good luck with that from a publishing standpoint in terms of, just being able to, keep the doors open and the lights on something like that. But there are a couple of very promising technologies, molecular recognition technology, MRT. There's basic gold solvent extraction, but that's, you're going to really have to do some chemistry to make that kind of stuff work. There's some really interesting stuff going on with what's called electrowinning in terms of, the electrical, using electricity to just basically crystallize out what you're looking for. There's some really interesting science that's going on. Well, I mean, we could talk about it all day, but I guess, but if you're just Joe or Susie investor out there thinking, oh, I'm going to go out there and find the best stock and buy it. And this is a tough sector. A lot of people have lost a lot of money. Beware, be wary. It is a minefield, and even for people who know a little bit about what's going on, that would be me. It is a very, very tough field to wrap your arms around.
Okay, just taking us back to where we are right now, it's the Sprott Natural Resource Symposium.
Yes.
Yeah, here in Vancouver. You're going to be speaking about the end of globalization.
I am.
I think that relates kind of to our conversation on rare earths. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. We've spent 40 years, globalizing the world economy. When I say we, I mean the United States, Canada, the West. As globalizing the economy. We're in for a crash program to deglobalize. A lot of people have awakened to the idea that globalization just isn't what it's all cracked up to be. It has stopped being the value proposition that it was supposed to be. Free trade isn't free. Cheap goods at Walmart and Target are not cheap. The only thing that kind of makes it work is the subsidy of a welfare state. Behind it, you lose your manufacturing base, you lose your industrial base, you lose your skills base, you wreck your communities, you wreck your people, you lose your human capital, you lose your university capital in the sense that if there are no jobs for people who graduate with certain engineering degrees, they don't major in those subjects anymore, and the universities shut them down. Globalization. Started out as perhaps a good idea, although there were skeptics. It has become a disaster to the U.S. and the West. You see it in the rise of what the cynics call populism. I call it pragmatism. I mean, if you're some guy or some gal out at some factory town in the middle of the country, and the factory or the mill closed, and you've lost your job, and your father lost their job, or your mom lost their job, or something, and what are you going to do? All your friends are on taking opioids or whatever, and there's a whole lot of things that happen when you deindustrialize a country. People say, oh, but the U.S. is still a very industrial country. It's a bipolar industrial country. We're doing certain very high-tech, high-end things, but a lot of the skills up and down the industrial ladder have gone away. You say, well, we still make steel. Yeah, we do, not nearly as much as we used to. But do we have a commercial shipbuilding industry? No. Do we have even something really high tech like access to space? We think, oh, the United States, we have this great space industry. Do we? Can we put our own astronauts in space? We haven't launched a U.S. astronaut on a U.S. rocket in 10 years. I mean, are you kidding? We pay the Russians $75 million a seat to launch our astronauts to the space station, which theoretically we own. This is not the hallmark of an industrialized country. We're not an advanced country. When you look at how much of a Boeing jet is made in America, 50 years ago, if you're building Boeing 707s, you could say that about 96, 98% of that jet was made in America in terms of all the way down to the ore in the ground. Anymore, you're lucky if 30% of a Boeing jet is made in the United States. In terms of all the other components, the basic materials, the wire bundles, the lighting systems, So it's a very long, complex situation. But my talk, and I have all of 20 minutes tomorrow to make the point, is that we've been globalizing, and all of a sudden we realize that we've essentially outsourced entire supply chains to other countries who are not necessarily on our side. We've sent the intellectual property out of the country. We've lost control of our industrial destiny, and so we've lost control of our destiny. And we are seeing a rapid crashback in terms of trying to recover those lost supply chains and those lost industrial capabilities. I don't know that it's going to work. I really don't. So that's why everybody should invest smartly to preserve their wealth over time. Because I'm not going to sit here and promise you wine and roses out of all this. But it's an investable moment. As well as if you care at all about the future of the country, it's an important moment. And when I say the country, if you're Canadian, it's your country too, or if you're Western European, if you're Japanese or South Korean, you're in the gun sights as well of the other side.
Okay, we'll wrap it up there for now, unless you have any final words of advice for investors as we head into the final half of the year.
Just beware. Keep an eye on things. Don't get too ebullient or enthusiastic, but don't be afraid to take. Don't be afraid to take risk. Evaluate what your risk profile is. Dedicate some money to the risk, and then put it into the better ideas. And be careful about writing things down. But and then when things do go up, if they go up, when they go up, don't forget to sell. Take some of that money back off the table. If it goes up and you invested it in it, it's not that you're the genius. Okay, you are very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. Take some of that money back off the table. You may or may not be able to ever do this again.